In the darkest reaches of space, when storms of fire and stone threatened to tear apart a forgotten station, a lone keeper opened her doors to a stranger, not of flesh and bone, but of scales that shimmered with starlight, an ancient being whose secret would change the fate of an entire world. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The storm came with no warning, hammering Waypost 9 until every plate of metal shook with tired anger. Meteors screamed through the void, slamming against shields that groaned under their weight. June Albright stood at the main console, her eyes fixed on lines of red warnings. She steadied her breath and adjusted the magnetic dampeners, her fingers moving with the calm of someone who had been through storms before. But this night felt different. The meteors fell harder, sharper, as if the universe wanted to remind her how small she truly was. She walked the narrow passage, magnetic boots clanking with every step. The station was quiet, except for the rumble of the storm outside. June checked viewport 12, finding a thin crack crawling across the glass. She pressed a sensor over it, sealing the weakness for now. She muttered to herself, "Another night in paradise." Waypost 9 was not beautiful. It was old, patched with repairs, and full of mismatched parts scavenged from ships long gone. But it was hers. She had inherited it from her mother, who once believed that every station along the outer rim was a doorway to fortune. June no longer dreamed of fortune. She only dreamed of keeping the lights on and the air flowing. The alarm that broke the silence was not for meteors. It was deeper, slower, a sound that shook the air in her lungs. June froze. The proximity sensor flashed, warning of something massive moving through the storm. She leaned over the console, eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. Whatever it was larger than any ship she had ever seen. More than 300 meters, and it moved not with the flow of debris, but against it, steady and deliberate. The communication panel crackled. Static filled the room, then cleared, leaving a voice like stone grinding against stone. Waypost 9, this is a traveler in need. My propulsion systems have failed. I request shelter until the storm has passed. June's hands tightened on the console. She had heard every kind of voice in her years out here. Smugglers, scouts, lost miners, but never one that sounded this ancient. Her training told her to ask the right questions. Her voice was steady when she replied. Unknown vessel. Identify yourself. State your ship classification. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant roar of meteors striking metal. Then came the answer, slow and certain. I have no ship. I am myself. My name is Calith. I'm what your kind would call a starworm. Her blood ran cold. She'd heard the stories of starworms since childhood. Tales told in dusty bars where old captains drank away their failures. Creatures said to swim through space like whales in ancient oceans, their scales shining with starlight. Legends, not reality. And yet, through the storm, she caught a glimpse of wings folding against the current and scales reflecting the weak sun. Jasper Brooks, the station mechanic, stumbled into the control room, pulling on his jacket. What's happening? June kept her eyes on the monitor. "We've got company." He squinted at the display. "It's no ship." The voice came again, softer this time. "I can pay. I carry credits in Universal Standard. But more than that, I seek only warmth and rest. My strength is thin. My wounds are many." June stared at the docking bay controls. Every rule in the book told her to deny entry. An unknown life form in a storm was a risk no officer should take. But she thought of her mother's words. "Sometimes you judge a being by how they ask for help." "Bay 2 is the only one big enough," June said at last, her voice low. "It isn't perfect, but it's pressurized. Follow the beacon. Don't break my rails." A rumble filled the channel, like distant thunder. "Your kindness will not be forgotten." She pulled on her environmental suit, checking each seal with careful hands. Jasper followed her to the bay, muttering about how this was either bravery or madness. The doors groaned open, metal protesting against the storm. Light spilled into the cargo hold, catching on dust and old machinery. Then the worm entered. He moved with care, wings folding tight, body coiling like a river of black steel. His scales shimmered with lines of silver that pulsed faintly, as if blood carried starlight itself. He filled the bay, and the station shuddered under his weight. June stood behind the barrier, her breath caught in her chest. Caliph lowered his head. Up close, his eyes were not fire, but deep twilight, glowing with a weary light. His voice rumbled through her bones. "Thank you. I have traveled far. The storm caught me at my weakest." June saw the damage then. Scales cracked, wounds leaking faint silver light. One wing bent at a painful angle. She wanted to step back, but instead she took a breath and steadied herself. "You're hurt," she said. "Your medicines will not heal me," Caliph replied. "But your warmth may. The storm has dimmed my fire." June glanced at Jasper, then back at the worm. "There's an old fusion kettle in the corner. It hasn't been used in years, but it should still work. It will give you heat." Caliph lowered his massive head in what seemed like a bow. "You are generous, June Albright. I will remember this." The storm roared outside, but inside Bay 2, the ancient worm curled into himself, scales glowing faintly as the fusion kettle hummed to life. June stood there in silence, the weight of her choice pressing heavy on her chest. She had opened her doors to a legend, and as the night stretched on, she realized the storm outside was no longer the only force that could change her world. The old fusion kettle hissed and groaned as June Albright adjusted its worn controls. A dim orange glow spread across Bay 2, casting long shadows on the bulkheads. The warmth crept slowly into the cold space, filling the air with a soft hum. Frost on the steel walls began to melt, dripping in thin lines that curled into steam. The sound of the storm outside faded to a distant rumble, but inside the bay, something new had taken hold. It felt like the first calm after a long night. Caliph, the star worm, shifted closer to the kettle. His scales, his massive form, coiled carefully so as not to crush the crates stacked in the corners. His eyes, half closed, glowing with a quiet, weary fire. June leaned against a crate, helmet unlatched, arms crossed. She studied him with the cautious stare of someone still trying to believe what stood before her. She had heard myths about star worms all her life, but never once had she thought she would be sharing her cargo bay with one. "Don't mind the mess," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "I keep telling myself that chaos has its own system. Maybe one day I'll find it." Calith's head tilted slightly, his gaze sweeping across the scattered equipment. "I see patterns. You keep the tools closest that you use the most. You store what may be needed later where you must reach. Your order is not chaos. It is survival." June gave a small laugh. "You sound like Jasper. He's always saying my mess makes sense, though I think he just doesn't want to clean it." ... Jasper, perched on a ladder nearby, smirked but said nothing. He tightened a pipe on the kettle, making sure the heat would last through the night. As the warmth filled the bay, the worm began to speak again. His voice was slow, deep and steady, like mountains moving. "I have traveled through lanes where no ship dares go. I have drifted beside dead suns and watched new stars breathe their first fire. I remember worlds that shone with promise, and worlds that fell silent before your kind was born." June listened, caught by the weight of his words. She had always thought herself small, her station small, her life nothing more than a string of repairs and supply runs. But hearing his stories made her feel as if she were standing at the edge of something endless. He spoke of civilizations forgotten, of ships that once mapped the stars, now nothing but dust. He spoke of how silence grew heavy in places where light never reached. And then he paused, as if "Why come here?" June asked softly. "Why a place so far from trade routes and ambition?" Calith's eyes opened wider, locking onto hers. "I came searching. For what? I no longer remember. I thought it was treasure once, then wisdom, then forgiveness. Perhaps now I only seek warmth." The honesty in his voice cut through her. June thought of her own choices, the family she had left behind, the husband who had promised stars but left her only emptiness, the second who fled from the loneliness of the outer rim. She thought of the colony below, still clinging to life, still waiting for someone to fight for it. "I know that feeling," she said, almost whispering. "Chasing something until you forget what it was. Staying not because it's easy, but because you're too stubborn to leave." The kettle hummed louder, its heat filling the bay like a small sun. Caliph stretched slightly, a slow ripple of muscle and scale, and for the first time, June saw relief in his body. "Tell me about this world," he said. "Tell me about Moro 4 below us." She shifted on her crate and rubbed her hands together, thinking. It was supposed to be the next big thing. Rare minerals, fertile valleys, a perfect spot for a jump gate. People poured in 60 years ago, full of hope. My mother was one of them. Now the minerals are harder to reach than they thought, and the jump gate was built 3 systems away. People started leaving 20 years back. The few that remain are stubborn, proud, or too poor to run. They farm what land will listen. They mine just enough to keep the machines alive. Caliph lowered his head, his eyes glowing faintly brighter. "And you, why stay?" "Someone has to," June answered. "This station is the only fuel stop for 3 sectors. Without it, the colony would be completely cut off. I can't abandon them, even if I wanted to." The worm gave a sound that might have been laughter. A deep rumble that shook dust from the rafters. A guardian then, a keeper of the flame. June smiled bitterly. The fool with too much pride, maybe. The line between the two is thinner than you think, Kalith said. The hours passed with stories traded back and forth. June told him of Rhea Malin, the mayor of the colony, who held meetings over bread because the smell kept tempers calm. She told him of Talia, Jasper's partner, who could repair broken machines with scraps no one else would bother with. She told him of the children who carried water in cracked buckets, and of the miners who still sang on the long nights to keep their spirits alive. In return, Kalith spoke of vast trade routes once controlled by his kind. He told of hidden wealth placed in banks across systems, of fortunes left to grow untouched for centuries. And then his tone changed, quieter, almost sad. I hoarded more than I gave, he admitted. I watched civilizations wither while I counted. I lost what mattered most. But your kindness reminded me of something I had forgotten. Wealth means nothing without purpose. Strength means nothing without compassion. June leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Are you saying you're rich? Actually rich? Resources remain, he said simply. Investments that grew while I wandered. Enough to change more than one world. The storm outside faded into silence. Inside Bay 2, the warmth lingered. June looked at the worm, her heart heavy with the truth of her colony's struggle and the possibility she had just heard. For the first time, she wondered if the arrival of this ancient being was not a curse of fate, but a chance. A chance to save a world too many had already abandoned. And as she sat there, listening to the quiet hum of the fusion kettle, June realized the night had given her not only shelter from the storm, but also a question she had never dared ask. What if there was still hope? The next morning brought a calm sky above Morrow 4. But inside Waypost 9, change was already moving. June Albright walked through the main corridor with tired eyes, but her mind was sharp. She had not slept. Instead, she had replayed Kalith's words again and again. The star worm had revealed his truth. He was not just a wandering giant in need of warmth. He was a keeper of wealth, of resources left untouched for centuries. Now, the question stood heavy in the air. Would he truly use that power to save a dying colony? By midday, 3 sleek ships approached the docking ring. They were painted with the silver crest of Horizon Trust, one of the most respected financial houses in human space. June watched as they docked with careful precision. From the first ship stepped Mira Dosan, tall and composed, her suit carrying the quiet shine of someone who lived among numbers and contracts. Beside her was Han Rutherford, a thin man whose eyes flickered constantly as if scanning invisible lines of data. Administrator Albright, Mira said warmly, offering her hand. Thank you for hosting us on such short notice. When one of our oldest accounts suddenly awakens, we listen. June shook her hand, still unsure what to expect. This is not exactly a grand hall, she said, gesturing at the patched walls of Bay 2. But it will hold. Mira smiled. Often, the most important deals are born in places like this. Kalith shifted from the shadows, his massive form filling the bay with quiet presence. His silver-lined scales glowed faintly in the light of the fusion kettle. The financiers did not scream or run. Instead, they bowed their heads in respect. for they knew the name he gave them. Caliph or Aurelius was one that had once shaped the very roots of trade. Han cleared his throat. We have reviewed the preliminary figures. Purchasing all land rights on Morrow 4 will not be simple. The holdings are fractured across families. Each has different debts, different histories. There are laws. There are procedures. Then we will follow them, Caliph said, his voice calm but firm. We will honor every family. We will offer not just purchase, but partnership. For the next 6 hours, the bay became a marketplace of futures. Holographic maps stretched across the air, showing valleys, ridges, and mining claims. Every name carried a weight. The Brennans with their northern fields, the Okanas who farmed in the valleys, the Petrovs who clung to the southern mines. Mira read values in a steady voice. Northern Ridge farmland. Current market estimate, 8 million credits. Offer 24, Caliph said without hesitation, and include a 10% share in the cooperative that follows. Han's eyes widened. That is 3 times the worth. You will bleed your accounts. Caliph's gaze held steady. Resources are meant to build, not rot. We will not cheat those who have already been cheated by time. Again and again, the pattern repeated. Generous offers flowed, not to strip people of their homes, but to give them a path forward. Every deal included not only payment, but shares, ownership in what would come. June watched, stunned, as the starworm guided numbers with the same care he used to fold his great wings. Rhea Malin, mayor of Settlement Prime, arrived late in the meeting, dust still clinging to her jacket from the farms below. She listened, arms crossed, asking sharp questions about rights and control. Our people will not be tenants on their own land, she said firmly. Nor should they, Caliph replied. They will be partners. No family will be forced. Those who wish to keep their claims will keep them. But those who wish to sell will gain wealth and shares in the new Morrow 4. Rhea studied him with wary eyes, then nodded. If this is true, then maybe hope has not left us. Soon the work began. Contracts were drawn, sent down to the surface. Families met in kitchens and barns, debating whether to trust a dragon with their lives. Some said no, but most said yes, because the alternative was waiting for their world to die. By the end of the month, the first projects were underway. Massive drills bored deep into the rock and struck cold, clean water. Aquifers that had been locked away for centuries rose up in bright streams, feeding new wells in every settlement. Cheers echoed across dusty streets as children filled their cups from taps that had been dry for decades. Air towers were built next, tall silver machines that stood against the wind. Soon, tomatoes the size of fists and grain strong enough to resist drought filled the tables of families who had known only scarcity. Trade returned as if drawn by the light of renewal. Freighters spotted the new beacon from orbit and chose to dock. Their captains spoke of fair fees, clean fuel, and a welcome that felt genuine. Markets began to fill again. Shops reopened. Children no longer spoke only of leaving, but of staying, of learning, of building. June found herself busier than ever. She became the translator between the vast vision of Caliph and the daily lives of her people. She explained plans in simple words, calmed fears, and kept projects moving on time. Rhea often told her she was no longer just a station keeper, but a leader. June never claimed the title, but she carried the work. As weeks turned to months, the face of Morrow 4 began to change. Water ran in the valleys, crops grew strong, and the hum of machinery no longer sounded like struggle, but like progress. One evening, June stood beside Caliph on the ridge above Settlement Prime. The town below glowed with new lights, its streets alive with movement. "You've given them hope again," June said quietly. "I remembered something," Caliph answered, his voice low. "Wealth is not meant to be kept in silence. It is meant to build futures. You reminded me of that when you opened your door." The storm that once threatened to break them had passed. In its place stood a promise, not whispered but lived, that Morrow 4 could rise again. And for the first time in years, the settlers believed in tomorrow. The observatory dome was nearly finished when the call came through. June Albright had been tightening bolts herself, refusing to let the workers handle all the small tasks. She liked the feeling of metal under her gloves, the satisfaction of work done with her own hands. The dome was meant to be a gift, a place where the people of Morrow 4 could look at the stars and believe they belonged among them. But before she could test the rotation gears, a soft chime rang in her ear. It was the old proximity tone, steady and deep, the same tone that had once announced Caliph. June felt her chest tighten. She hurried back into the station's control ring, her boots clicking against the deck. 3 ships floated just outside Waypost 9. Their hulls were battered, their engines weak, and their signals flagged distress. June opened the channel, and a tired voice filled the room. "This is Captain Amira Saul," the woman said, her face appearing on the screen. Her eyes were shadowed by exhaustion, but her voice carried quiet strength. "We are carrying families from the Vega Rim. Our colony was seized by decree. We were given days to leave. We have engineers, doctors, teachers. We have 800 souls aboard. We ask for shelter." June stared at the numbers, flashing on the console. 800 men, women and children. 800 lives with nowhere else to go. The memory of another night returned to her. The storm, the request, the choice she had made. She thought of Caliph's voice when he had asked not with force, but with humility. Rhea Mallin's voice came through the side channel from the surface. "June, we cannot house 800 people. Our systems are still stretched. We'll break if we try." June's hand hovered over the controls. "We can house them tonight," she said firmly. "We'll figure out tomorrow when tomorrow comes." Caliph's shadow slid across the viewport. The starworm moved with slow grace, his massive wings folding as he positioned himself beside the ships. "Open your doors," he said. "Let them breathe." Han Rutherford, who had been recalculating budgets in the lower deck, muttered into the channel. "Without permits, without clearance, we risk violation." June didn't hesitate. First shelter, the docking bays, opened. Groaning, but steady. Bay 2, Bay 3, and even the secondary ring, unused for years, came alive. Volunteers ran through the halls, preparing blankets, water, and food. The kitchens boiled broth, then soup, then stew that smelled like comfort itself. The first refugees stepped onto the deck with uncertain steps. Their clothes were worn, their faces lined with the dust of travel. Children clung to their parents' hands. June greeted them at the barrier, her voice steady. "Welcome to Morrow 4. You are safe here." Amira Saul came last, her shoulders straight, though fatigue weighed her down. She looked June in the eyes. "Thank you. Others turned us away. You didn't." "I was given shelter once," June said simply. "This is my way of passing it forward." Caliph pressed his great body against the hull of the largest ship, lending it warmth. Inside, children pressed their palms to the glass, grinning when the worm blinked back at them. For a moment, fear was replaced with wonder. The following days tested the colony. Housing was stretched thin, food supplies rationed carefully, and every settlement had to share what little it had. Yet there was no panic. The council met in the market hall, where Ria Malin kept order with calm determination. Mira Dosun returned with funds to support the new arrivals. Han reworked the budgets until they fit like puzzle pieces. Jasper and Talia rewired old storage sheds into living quarters. The learning hall opened its doors early, teaching refugee children alongside local ones. There were arguments, of course. Families worried about losing what they had gained. Old settlers feared newcomers might not stay or might take too much. But each argument ended with the same truth. They had once been on the edge of death themselves. Shelter had been given freely to them. Now it was their turn to give it to others. On the 7th night, the observatory dome opened for the first time. The polished mirror reflected the sky, and stars spilled into the viewing hall. June stood at the back, watching as children gasped at the sight of endless constellations. Amira stood beside her, her tired face softening. "We'll work hard," Amira said. "We'll earn our place. You ain't regret this." "There is no regret in shelter," June answered. "A roof first, then the rest." In the crowd, a small boy in a patched sweater raised his hand when the instructor asked who wanted to learn to fly. He stretched higher than anyone else, standing on tiptoe to reach for a dream. Light from the scope touched his face, and June smiled, knowing this was the beginning of something larger than herself, larger than one station, larger even than Morrow 4. Outside, Caliph coiled along the ridge, his body a dark outline against the horizon. He was no longer just a legend, but a part of their daily life, a guardian who had chosen to build instead of wander. The new arrivals brought challenge, but they also brought skills, strength, and hope. Farms gained workers, schools gained teachers, and the colony gained voices that sang new songs in the square at night. June pinned a simple charter to the notice board in Settlement Prime. It was written in her own handwriting, all in small letters. First, we offer shelter. Then, we share work. Then, we write the ledgers. Always, we leave the light on for whoever comes next. The paper fluttered in the evening wind as families walked past, reading it aloud. Some smiled, some nodded, some cried quietly. And as the night stretched across Morrow 4, the colony no longer felt like a fragile outpost at the edge of survival. It felt like a home, not just for those who had stayed, but for those who had arrived with nothing but the hope of beginning again. For the first time, the people of Morrow 4 believed their circle of shelter would never close.